Jesus warned people not to pray a certain way, yet every week millions of Christians pray exactly that way, and the prayer they repeat is the one Jesus gave. Let that land for a moment. The most repeated prayer in human history, said in churches, at bedsides, at funerals by children who barely know what the words mean. And Jesus, in the same breath that he gave it, warned you not to pray that way. Something does not add up, and if you have been repeating this prayer your entire life, I want you to pause with me for a moment, because what Jesus says just before giving this prayer is one of the most overlooked sentences in the entire Bible. And the fact that almost no one talks about this is exactly why you are watching this video. Most Christians have repeated this prayer their entire lives, but very few have ever noticed the warning that comes before it. That warning is in Matthew chapter 6. It is sitting right there in plain sight. And what it reveals about how Jesus understood prayer, about what prayer actually is, about what the church quietly replaced it with, changes everything. The prayer Jesus gave was never meant to be repeated. Stay with me, because once you see what Jesus was actually doing here, you will never hear the Lord's Prayer the same way again. Let us go back to the moment Jesus said it. The setting is the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is teaching a group of ordinary people gathered around him. There is no stage, no performance, just a teacher sitting among those who came to listen. And then he begins to speak about prayer. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Matthew chapter 6, verse 7 through 8. Read that again slowly. Do not babble. Do not repeat. Do not multiply your words. Jesus links repetitive prayer directly to pagan practice. This is not a gentle suggestion. This is a line being drawn. And this creates one of the strangest moments in the entire Bible, because immediately after warning against repetitive prayer, Jesus gives the most repeated prayer in human history. Now the viewer must sit with that contradiction, because it is real, and it does not resolve itself the way most people assume. Here is the part almost no one notices. The Greek word translated as babbling is batalogio, and it is far more specific than most people realize. The word batalogeo carries the idea of meaningless repetition, of words said over and over until they lose their weight, until the mouth moves but the inner person is somewhere else entirely. Jesus is not saying do not ask for the same thing more than once. He is not saying prayers must be short or formal. He is saying do not treat words as the mechanism. Do not believe that the more you say something, the more power it carries. Do not confuse volume and repetition with connection. The pagan world, and much of the religious world of Jesus' day, operated on the assumption that the gods responded to quantity, to persistence, to the sheer accumulation of sacred syllables repeated enough times. Say it 100 times, and it becomes more powerful. Repeat the formula, and the divine must respond. Jesus was dismantling that entire framework in one sentence. Notice what he says immediately after the warning. For your Father knows what you need before you ask him. This is not a transactional deity waiting to be convinced by volume. This is a Father who already knows. Which means prayer, in Jesus' understanding, is not about transmitting information to a God who lacks it. It is not about wearing down a reluctant deity with enough repetitions until he finally relents. Prayer, as Jesus frames it, is something else entirely. And this raises a question that has haunted serious readers for centuries. If Jesus warned against repetitive prayer, what exactly did he do next? To understand why Jesus said what he said, we have to understand the world he said it in. Prayer in the ancient world was almost universally a technology, not a relationship, a technology. Something you did correctly or incorrectly, and the gods responded accordingly. The Egyptians had elaborate prayer formulae passed down through priestly lineages. Miss a word, mispronounce a syllable, and the ritual was void. The Greeks and Romans repeated prayers in precise ceremonial patterns, at the right altar, on the right day, facing the right direction. The effectiveness of the prayer was believed to depend on the accuracy and persistence of the repetition. The gods of the ancient world were not personal. They were powerful, and they had to be managed. Most people read right past this, but it is essential to what Jesus was doing. He was not making a minor adjustment to existing religious practice. He was dismantling an entire cosmology of what God is. But something strange happens when you trace this pattern into the Jewish world that Jesus was speaking to. Even in the Jewish prayer tradition of the first century, there were formalized prayers repeated at set hours. The Amidah, the Shema, structured blessings with specific wording. The Pharisees in particular were known for long public prayers, prayers performed for an audience, prayers designed to signal devotion as much as express it. Jesus had already addressed this just a few verses earlier. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. Matthew chapter 6, verse 5. So Jesus is layering two warnings here. Do not pray to be seen by people. Do not pray by multiplying empty words. Both warnings point at the same root problem. Prayer has been reduced to performance, either for a human audience or for a transactional deity who responds to volume. What Jesus is exposing is not a problem with specific words or rituals. He is exposing a misunderstanding of what God is. If God is an audience who needs to be impressed, you perform for him. If God is a distant being who needs to be persuaded, you wear him down with repetition. But if God is a father who already knows your need before you speak it, then prayer becomes something altogether different. It becomes a turning, an orientation, a coming home. And this is exactly where the text takes a turn that almost every reader misses entirely. Here is the part that should make every serious reader pause. Jesus did not say, repeat these words. He said, pray like this. And those two phrases are not the same thing. If you have read this passage before, be honest with yourself for a moment. Did you ever notice that Jesus says, pray like this, and not repeat this prayer? Most people never noticed, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Look carefully at the exact words Jesus uses when he transitions from the warning to the example. He does not say, repeat this prayer. He does not say, memorize these words. He does not say, when you gather together, recite this. This, then, is how you should pray. Matthew chapter 6, verse 9. How you should pray. Those words carry the entire weight of this teaching. How is not what? How is not the content? How is the structure, the orientation, the movement? Jesus is showing his disciples a way of praying, not handing them a script. Most Christians have read that verse hundreds of times and never felt the distinction. But once you feel it, you cannot unfeel it. Think about it this way. If a master musician sits down with a student and says, let me show you how to play a melody, he plays something beautiful. And then he says, now you play. He is not saying play exactly what I just played for the rest of your life. He is showing the student what music can sound like, what the keys feel like under intention, what a melody means. He is initiating the student into music itself. This is what Jesus is doing. He is not writing a liturgy. He is demonstrating a living structure. He was not giving them a formula. He was opening a door. The question is, what is on the other side of that door? And why has so much of Christian tradition chosen to stay on this side of it? In the original Greek, the distinction is even clearer. The word Jesus uses for how in that verse is the Greek word hotos. It means in this manner, in this way, after this fashion. It is the word a teacher uses when demonstrating a method, not when dictating a text. There is a different Greek word Jesus could have used if he wanted them to repeat the prayer word for word. He did not use it. He used the word that means this is the shape, this is the direction, this is how the thing moves. And yet something happened in the centuries after Jesus that took this living pattern and cast it into stone. We will get to that. But first we need to understand what the pattern actually is, because it is more alive than most people have ever been shown. What Jesus gave is not a script, it is a map. Every line of the prayer he demonstrated represents a movement of the inner person toward God. Not a sentence to be said, a direction to be faced. The prayer opens with orientation. Our Father who art in heaven. Before you ask for anything, you locate yourself. You remember who you are speaking to. You remember your relationship, not a transaction, a belonging. Hallowed be thy name. The second movement is reverence, an internal shift from self-centeredness to sacred acknowledgement. You are not coming with a list. You are coming with an open heart that first recognizes the holiness of what it is approaching. This is not passive. This is the most active thing a human being can do. Genuine reverence requires the full surrender of the ego's agenda. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. This movement is alignment. Before you ask for what you want, you surrender what you want to what is true and good and whole. You are not informing God of what needs to happen. You are releasing your grip on the outcome. Give us this day our daily bread. Now, only after orientation, reverence, and surrender does the prayer move into asking. And notice how it asks. Today, this day, not the accumulation of every anxiety about tomorrow. This movement teaches the practitioner to trust in sufficiency rather than live in scarcity. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. This is the movement of relational honesty, of examining the self, of recognizing that forgiveness is not only received but extended. The prayer connects the inner state of the one praying to what they are asking for. You cannot genuinely ask for forgiveness while holding another in contempt. The prayer makes that visible. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. This is the movement of humility, an acknowledgement that the one praying is not self-sufficient, that there are forces and patterns larger than personal willpower. And it is a request not for comfort, but for the strength to walk a true path. Every line is a doorway, and the question is not whether you can say the line, the question is whether you can step through it. When you see the prayer this way, something shifts. It is no longer 6 sentences, it is 6 inner movements, 6 ways of facing the sacred, and they were always meant to be practiced, inhabited, entered into with full awareness, not repeated while your mind is already somewhere else. This is what prayer as a living practice looks like, not recitation, presence, not performance, contact. Most people would have clicked away from this video long before now, but you stayed. And that tells me something. Most people have repeated this prayer their entire lives without ever noticing the warning sitting right before it. But something in you noticed, or something in you was ready to notice. And that is not an accident. If what you are hearing is opening something in you right now, take a moment and like this video so it can reach someone else who is searching the way you were. Subscribe to the esoteric path if you want to keep walking deeper into the teachings of Jesus, the way they were originally meant to be understood. And if this moment feels real to you, leave a comment below and write, "I am waking up." Not as a slogan, as a marker, so I know you are here, and so others walking this path know they are not alone. Something happened in the centuries after Jesus that needs to be named clearly. Not with anger, not with blame, simply with honesty. The living pattern that Jesus demonstrated became, over time, a liturgical fixture. By the late 1st century, the Didache, one of the earliest Christian documents outside the New Testament, already instructs believers to pray the Lord's Prayer 3 times a day, word for word. The transition had already begun within a generation of Jesus' death. Here is the part that should stop you cold. The very thing Jesus warned against was precisely what began to happen to his own teaching within decades of his ministry. By the time Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire in the 4th century, the Lord's Prayer had been fully ritualized. Recited in unison, at specific times, in specific services, with specific postures. This is not inherently evil. Ritual has real value. Form preserves teaching across time. But something gets lost in that process. What gets lost is the inner dimension. When a prayer becomes part of a liturgy, it is easy to say it correctly and mean it not at all. When a prayer becomes a requirement, it is easy to fulfill the requirement while leaving the heart entirely uninvolved. The mouth speaks, but the inner person has gone somewhere else. And this is exactly what Jesus said he was warning against. Not the words themselves, the absence of the person behind the words. We must be fair here. Institutions need structure, and structure needs repetition. A church of thousands cannot sustain itself on purely private, formless prayer. There must be shared language, shared rhythm. The liturgical traditions develop the Lord's Prayer as a communal anchor, and there is something genuinely beautiful about a community finding the same words at the same moment. The problem is not the prayer in a communal setting. The problem is when the form replaces the substance. When saying the prayer becomes the same thing as praying. When the repetition of words becomes the substitute for the inner movements those words were designed to initiate. This is the distinction Jesus was drawing, and it has enormous implications for how you and I come before God right now today. Jesus was not founding a religion. He was opening a relationship. Every teaching he gave about prayer points toward the same thing. Prayer is the practice of conscious contact with the Father, not the recitation of approved language, not the performance of religious duty, conscious contact, living connection, actual presence. He calls God Father repeatedly, not Lord, not Almighty, Father, and not the distant formal father of a royal court. He uses the Aramaic word Abba, which is the word a child uses in intimacy, the word that carries warmth and safety and total trust. Most people read right past that word and never feel what it costs to say it and mean it. When Jesus says, "Go into your inner room and close the door and pray to your Father who is unseen," he is not describing a location. He is describing an inner posture. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. Matthew chapter 6, verse 6. The inner room is not a prayer closet. It is the interior space of a human being that is gathered, present, undistracted. It is the place you go when the performance stops and the person begins. This is where prayer lives, not in the repetition of language, in the presence of a person who is turned fully toward the sacred. There is a thread running through everything Jesus taught about prayer that connects to his most central teaching of all. The kingdom of God is not coming with things that can be observed, nor will they say, "Look, here it is," or "There it is," for, in fact, the kingdom of God is among you. Luke chapter 17, verses 20 and 21. Among you. Or, as some translations render it, within you. The kingdom is not a future location. It is a present reality accessible from the inside, and prayer for Jesus is the practice of accessing that reality, not performing toward a God far away, but turning toward the living presence that is already here, already within, already closer than breath. This is the teaching the institutional church never quite knew how to transmit, because it cannot be controlled, and it cannot be administered. It can only be lived. You are alive right now, in this moment. And the question Jesus asked of the people on that hillside 2,000 years ago is the same question being asked of you right now. How are you praying? Not whether you are praying, how. Because there is a version of prayer that is nothing more than religious obligation fulfilled. Words said because they are supposed to be said, a box checked, a duty discharged. And Jesus said explicitly that this kind of prayer misses the point entirely. And there is another version, the version Jesus was pointing at. A prayer that begins with becoming still, that orients itself toward the sacred before asking anything, that releases rather than demands, that trusts rather than argues. The difference between those two versions of prayer is not in the words, it is in the person saying them. Most people who have grown up in Christian tradition know the Lord's Prayer by heart. They could say it in their sleep, in a fire, in grief, without thinking. And that familiarity is a gift. There is real comfort in those words. But Jesus is asking something more of you than comfort. He is asking you to use those words as a doorway, to let each line crack you open a little, to let our Father actually land in your body as a felt reality, not just a phrase. To let thy will be done be an actual surrender, not just a line in sequence. The prayer was always meant to be entered, not just spoken. So now we arrive at the place where knowledge becomes a choice. You have seen what Jesus actually said. You have heard the warning. You have followed the distinction between the pattern and the performance. You understand now that when Jesus said pray like this, he was not writing a script. He was demonstrating a living path. And now the honest question. How many times have you repeated this prayer without ever pausing on a single line? How many times have your lips moved while your mind was already somewhere else? How many times did you finish and feel nothing because you were performing for an audience rather than turning toward a presence? This is not condemnation. This is recognition. Most of us were taught to say the prayer. We were rarely, if ever, taught how to enter it. Most of us inherited a form without ever receiving the life that the form was meant to carry. The form was never the point. The person inside the form was always the point. You are the point. Your actual inner turning toward God is the point. Your genuine surrender, your real trust, your living contact with the Father, who already knows what you need before you ask. That is the prayer Jesus was teaching. So here is the invitation, not to stop praying the Lord's Prayer, but to try praying it the way Jesus taught it. Before you begin, become still. Just for a moment, close your eyes. Let your mind settle. Come fully into this moment, and then let the first words arrive, not from habit, but from intention. Our Father. Who is your Father? Where is He? Can you feel the weight of belonging inside that word? Let it land, fully, before you move on. If you try this once, just once, with real presence, you will understand immediately why Jesus said what He said. And you will never be able to pray that prayer the same way again. And now I want to ask you something honestly. How many times have you repeated this prayer without ever noticing what Jesus said just before it? Be honest. Drop your answer in the comments section. To everyone who has walked through this with me today, I want to say something to you directly. You did not stumble onto this. You were drawn here. Something in you was ready for this conversation. Something in you was already asking this question. And that means something. It means the same hunger that brought you here will keep leading you, if you let it. This channel exists for that hunger. Not to give you answers to carry passively, but to walk with you into the questions that actually matter. The teachings of Jesus are not a religious deposit locked inside an institution. They are a living fire, and they are for you. Not for the version of you that performs religion correctly, for the version of you that is actually awake, actually seeking, actually willing to have everything you assumed questioned in service of something true. If you are that person, you belong here. If you walk through this conversation seriously with me, I want to say something to you before you leave. What you experienced here was never meant to end with a video. If this stirred something real in you, the sacred scrolls are a deeper practice, a collection of teachings, meditations, and decoded scriptures designed for those who want to move beyond information and begin working with the teachings of Jesus as a living path. You will find them in the description and the pinned comment. And if you want to walk this path in community, come find us. It is a quiet space for people who still love Jesus but are no longer satisfied with empty religion. The door is open. And if you want to keep exploring these teachings with us, subscribe to this channel. Every video here is another doorway into the hidden depth of what Jesus was actually teaching. And the next one goes even deeper. So the question is not whether you know the Lord's Prayer. Most people do. The question is whether you have ever actually prayed it.